Alright guys, it's Chatterbox Reviews. Coming to you guys my throwback review for the pilot of Deadwood. Alright, so it's been a little bit since I've done a throwback pilot review here on the channel, but this is a series I started a little bit ago, taking a look at pilots from TV shows that have already finished airing, and ideally, in this case especially now, I believe this pilot is over 20 years old now. This year, 20 years old, so just wild to think about, but mainly shows that have been off the air for many years is kind of the goal. So taking a look back at some of these older shows, older, right, within the last like 20 years or so and stuff like that. Something like The Sopranos would maybe be like, you know, the oldest kind of going back. But yeah, so really enjoyed taking a look at these. I've done quite a few episodes, I think 7 or 8 episodes so far in the series, taking a look at 7 or 8 other pilots from other shows. And so this one is interesting because this is another series similar to Colony and Fringe that I took a look at earlier that I have not watched, and I'm actually starting to watch Deadwood now, and so I thought what a great time, you know, I just watched the pilot episode to start my watch of the series, so why not, you know, take a second to share my thoughts on the pilot episode, and then who knows, might share my thoughts, you know, as I finish the series, and that's what I intend to do. But yeah, so it won't be like some of the other reviews in this series, like Breaking Bad and Justified and some others that I've seen the whole series of, and so I can maybe comment a little bit more on that. So please excuse my ignorance if it comes out here during this review, because I have not seen more than this pilot episode of Deadwood, so just sharing my thoughts on this initial episode. So love to hear your guys' thoughts on Deadwood just in general, but also specifically this pilot episode. What did you think of it? If you've watched Deadwood all the way through and you're a fan of the show, obviously, love to hear your thoughts on the show as well. Maybe spare me the spoilers, but yeah, love to hear from you guys. And if you enjoyed this review, please leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel as well. Would really appreciate that. So in terms of my analysis for this pilot episode, I go by the same criteria for all of these pilots that I watch in the series. And that is the characters, the world or atmosphere, the hook or the twist, which is, to me, maybe the most important element, actually, of a pilot episode, after all. And then the originality and uniqueness and how it kind of stands out within the own genre that it plays in, right? So these are the 4 criteria that I go through, and then I'll give my rating out of 10 at the very end, and kind of, you know, talk about where it stacks up to me compared to the other pilots that I've watched so far, and of course the other pilots that I have seen that I've not reviewed yet. So anyways, first I just want to talk a little bit about the background of the show, and then we'll get into the criteria. So the series is created by, and this pilot episode is also written by David Milch, and he is also, you know, obviously drawing on the real life Deadwood, and Seth Bullock, Al Swearingen, Wild Bill Hickok, you know, a Soul Star, I believe, as well. So a lot of these are real people, right? The characters that we see depicted in this pilot episode, based off of real people and kind of the diaries and stories of that time in the late 1800s, obviously, within, you know, the camp and then later the town of Deadwood. And so, yeah, so it's kind of this fictional take, you know, and the funny thing is because it's the late 1800s, right, you know, the facts and the actual real stories of a lot of these things, I feel like, could be twisted just naturally. And so to kind of take a dramatic license to it seems appropriate, right? And so it's kind of an interesting fictional take on, you know, factual kind of historic events and elements here that are obviously kind of exaggerate here and there and twisted, to kind of make it interesting and add a little bit more to these characters and by extension, these real people that existed at the time. So really cool, the way that David Milch is able to do that. And I do, from reading, I have, read that he was involved in like virtually every episode writing. Which, creators of the shows usually are, but in this case, it sounds like he, essentially wrote almost every episode, even though he doesn't get credit for them necessarily. So that's really impressive too, if that's the case, which I believe it is. So, and really interesting to see. Obviously he did the Deadwood movie that follows this series up after it was canceled after season 3, and then he also has a credit on True Detective season 3, which I watched. But other than that, he hasn't done a whole lot in the last 10, 15 years, in the time basically since Deadwood, and he had a few other projects there, and I know he is getting older, so it makes sense, but yeah, kind of unfortunate that we haven't seen a whole lot from him, but I have heard really great things about the Deadwood movie, and I was around then when I was following the news and kind of, what the reactions were when that movie came out, even though I had not watched the show. So it looks like he did a really great job with that. So yeah, really great career for him. And then this pilot's directed by Walter Hill, who I'm not sure if he directs any more episodes of Deadwood specifically, but he directed and wrote the movie Southern Comfort, I believe, and quite a few other Westerns. And I think that's the film with Keith Carradine starring in it, or at least he directed other Westerns with him in it, and so you kind of see the connection there. Of course, he plays a big part in this episode as Wild Bill Hickok, right? And so, yeah, kind of cool to look down his history, and a really accomplished director, and definitely knows his way around the Western genre. You can see that for sure. And so it made a lot of sense to bring him on for this pilot episode, I think. So in terms of the cast, we have Timothy Olyphant, Ian McShane, Jim Beaver, Brad Dourif, John Hawkes, Keith Carradine, like I said, Molly Parker. Kind of a big ensemble cast in this pilot. A lot of different characters that we're introduced to, but I think the two main characters would be, Seth Bullock and Al Swearingen, played by Oliphant and Ian McShane. Maybe even more so is Seth Bullock, played by Timothy Olyphant. At least in this pilot episode, I would argue that he is our main character. If you had to pick one of them, I think he would be, the one. So yeah, really kind of a big ensemble cast, but a lot of great characters so far. And Timothy Olyphant, obviously love him in Justified. One of my favorite shows of all time, and Raylan Givens, one of my favorite characters of all time. Absolutely love what he does with that character. Ian McShane, I probably saw him maybe first in Pirates of the Caribbean 4, I think maybe, but you can see little glimpses of that, him as Blackbeard in that film in this pilot episode, and I'm sure we'll see even more of that as the series goes on. So I really loved him in that movie. So I've seen him in a few other things since, of course, but he is really great. Jim Beaver, kind of echoing that, Justified. He was amazing in that. He had a big role in season 4. He kind of had, a whole arc. He was really the season's protagonist / antagonist that whole season. So yeah, really, really great to see him there. That's what I know him from. Brad Dourif, the voice of Chucky, and been in Lord of the Rings, a few other things. So great career for him. John Hawkes, I remember seeing him in Eastbound and Down, I believe it is. Kind of a comedic role there, and to see him in this for a few years prior to that is really interesting as well. So yeah, really great cast here, and I really like all of them from other things so far. So it's kind of cool to recognize those names. Okay, so in terms of the premise of this pilot, we get Timothy Olyphant as Seth Bullock, as this marshal from Montana, who then chooses to relocate to Deadwood, which is a lawless camp, really, very small town that's kind of getting established here, that is not a part of the U.S. at all, and so literally is lawless, and so he moves there with John Hawkes' Soul Star, I believe is the character, and they open up a hardware hardware store in this town, and so that's kind of the main premise. Like that's the start of this pilot episode, is that he arrives in Deadwood, and then we get introduced to kind of what the rest of the town is like and what they've already established before he got there. And a big part of that is Ian McShane's Al Swearingen, who seems to be kind of the kingpin, or really kind of the leader of everything that's going on in the town. And he has this saloon called the Gem, which is kind of like a brothel in a way. Like there's prostitution and then drinking at the bar and that stuff. So kind of an interesting establishment that is really the focal point of the whole camp. That we get the kind of idea that that's what's going on. So that would be the premise for this one. And I have to say, as I'll get to my critiques, my analysis of it, there isn't actually a whole lot of plot that goes on in this episode. There are definitely side plots and that stuff. But yeah, in terms of the premise, it's really just Bullock relocating to Deadwood, and then we kind of see the rest of the episode play out. There's not a big kind of, plot point or big motivation that's driving the entire episode. It more is just the first kind of little jump to Deadwood, and then a kind of the rest of the episode plays out. So anyways, in terms of my analysis then for this pilot episode, let's talk first then about the introduction of the characters, or just a main character, but in this case I would, it's a kind of an ensemble, but I do obviously want to talk about two main ones, Seth Bullock and Al Swearingen. So I thought the characters, I didn't get a lot of nuance quite yet. And, it is early on in a pilot episode, but this is something that I look for that kind of separates some pilots from others. Because I think some are able to do this, but I'm not sure that we quite see a whole lot, from Seth Bullock in this episode. Although I think he would be the best example, right? We do get this idea, from the very, first scene of this pilot episode. We get introduced to Seth Bullock and the kind of guy he is. He seems like a very honest man. Though at times in the episode, it is a little different than Raylan Givens, because he, as Raylan Givens in Justified, is, the smartest one in the room, the loudest one in the room. And in this episode, especially when they're open up the hardware store and he's trying to, market it and everything, he's kind of talking in this low tone and kind of, a little shy almost a little bit. And so that's an interesting kind of side to the character. But yeah, we get this kind of, a guy that's honest. He's a lawman, and, wants to do the right thing. And he's also trying to avoid conflict in the very first scene. That's the whole point of that scene and what he does in hanging the man, rather than letting this mob at him and probably torturing him and killing him eventually. He does it, lawfully. He hangs him for his crimes and, goes on with it. And so obviously we don't get the idea quite yet, but I'm, getting the idea that, yeah, I mean, it's the whole point of bringing this honest man, this lawman, who is all about order and wants to establish order, to a complete chaos of a town in Deadwood. And so I think obviously we'll see how he interacts with Deadwood. But just in this pilot episode, I thought we could see a little more to him than we do. Again, he kind of does feel a little one note in that, honest man, he's a lawman, he believes in order and morals and that kind of thing. And he's almost like a fish out of water here in a place like Deadwood, surrounded by a lot of other characters who don't believe that way, maybe except for the one religious guy who helps look after their hardware store, right? And so that's a bit of a contradiction there to that. But anyways, so just would have liked to see a little bit more, from him. But in terms of the physical introduction, I thought it was good to kind of, see him in that very first scene. It's kind of a really elongated sequence, and it establishes exactly who he is. Just would have liked a little more depth to that. Now, in terms of Al Swearingen, I really love this character already, just in one episode. I absolutely love it. I think Ian McShane is doing such a good job in this role. But again, not, pretty one note, right? We kind of get the idea that, like I said earlier, right? He is kind of the kingpin, if you will, or the kind of leader of a lot of the stuff that's going on. He has his kind of hands in a little bit of everything, right, in the town of Deadwood. And because he owns this, the gem, the saloon or the bar, it's kind of the whole focal point of the town. And so he knows and learns about everybody's business and kind of, gets his hand in everybody's business as well and takes a cut for himself, obviously. So, we get that idea, and he also has these like henchmen working for him that do his bidding. And so, yeah, we get a really good idea of what, he does, and obviously, even his tactics as well in this episode. Well, first of all, his whole interaction with the prostitute who shoots and kills the man, how he treats her, right? And that was a really great scene, because up until that point, we get the idea that, he's in control of things, but then he kind of slips, right, in that scene with the prostitute, takes her down to the ground and puts his, shoe on her neck. And just that kind of violent outburst shows that he is dead serious. And so that, I think, was really good at establishing that for his character. But yeah, I mean, beyond that, and then of course, the way he tries to negotiate this deal, right? And then he ends up killing the guy who decided to honor the deal and sell it to the guy. But of course, Al Swearingen was in on it the whole time and got him to do that to get the price up, and of course take his own cut. So we see a couple different situations here where we really bring out a lot of that character, but we don't really see any softer side of him. Maybe at the very end of the episode when that same prostitute comes and lies with him in his bed. And just his facial reaction, I think, in that scene is really important, because he's not angry at her. He's very kind of relaxed. And we don't really see him relaxed like that, or he almost seems joyful, right? And we don't really see that in the whole rest of the episode. So except for that, I would have liked to see a little bit more of a different side to him. But nonetheless, I love this character so far. And a great introduction to that character too. We get the I hadn't even watched the show and I knew this scene. Kind of iconic. It's the limber dick cocksucker. The Jim Beaver, great line.
But I stand here before you today, beholden to no human cocksucker, and working a paying fucking gold claim. And not the U.S. government saying I'm trespassing, or the savage fucking red man himself, or any of these limber dick cocksuckers passing themselves off as prospectors that better try and stop me.
And so he's sitting at the bar with Al Swearingen, and I think that's a really great introduction scene as well. So, yeah, overall, I do like the introduction of the characters. I think it could be better, though. I would just like to see a little bit more to those two characters that I'm sure we will get as the series goes on, but just not as much in this pilot. And then beyond that, I think all the other characters are just not big enough or don't get enough screen time here to really merit, seeing any other side of them or seeing any more, nuanced parts of them. Wild Bill Hickok, I would say, probably got the, next best screen time in this, but not a whole lot to him. He's kind of this celebrity, kind of infamous person that everyone knows about, everyone wants to get close to, but we don't actually learn a whole lot about his past, right? So I'm sure we'll get more of that as the series goes on. Okay, so next then is the world and atmosphere, how they kind of build this in the pilot, and I mean, this is great. I mean, it's just really, really great. Obviously, the Western, the period piece, the set design, costumes, cinematography, what else? Like, just everything looks and feels exactly like that period and really captures that kind of Western vibe. really, really well. So I think they do a really great job at that. And then obviously, you know, a big part of the show and what has made it very famous is the dialogue, the language, right? The amount of fucks and other cussing that goes on in just this pilot episode, but the whole show really. And I'm going to talk about this as well when I talk about, you know, what makes it unique or what makes it stand out. But I think that's, you know, that's a part of this world. Like, it is establishing this world that's, you know, yes, it's this Western that's in the late 1800s. So great job with the period and the genre here. But it's also capturing this world of lawlessness, this town that is chaos, really. Like, that's what they're establishing, and they do such a good job at that. And that dialogue and all that cussing and all the you know, dirty, you know, we get some nudity in the episode too. So all of this stuff is just contributing to that feeling of chaos, to lawlessness, to, you know, all of just that overall vibe that we get, you know, even in other Westerns, right? And I'm kind of skipping ahead on myself here with the uniqueness part of it, but even with other Westerns, we don't quite, you know, get this kind of language and these kinds of, you know, things that we're seeing here. And it's kind of brought out. Even it's even kind of a bit of a parallel here with the first scene of, you know, Seth Bullock in Montana. That, you know, that place and that world seems a little different than it does in Deadwood, right? Where we have a lawman. You know, Seth Bullock is the marshal of the town. He's carrying out the law. And in this and in Deadwood, there's nothing. There's no law. There's no lawman, right? And so I think they do a great job with that, and the dialogue and that kind of approach to this story and to these characters does a great service to really establishing that world. So I think, you know, some people complained about that kind of stuff with the dialogue and how many fucks there are and all that stuff. But I love it. I really do. I really respect that approach to things and really building that world. So flawless in my eyes, really. And let's just be honest, right? Like, this pilot is really impressive for 2004 that it came out. Just really immerses you in the world, right? You feel, to me at least, it was just over an hour, I believe, this pilot episode. And I was immersed, you know, the whole time with, like I said, the production design, the costumes, everything that's going into this just really feels like it's quality, right? It's well made, well thought out. And that obviously helps kind of build that world as well. So really great job in that aspect. Okay, so the hook or the twist. Now, I don't think this was the best in this pilot episode either. Now, what I'm referring to is usually you'll get this in the cold open of the pilot episode or the ending of the episode. So in some pilots, like Justified, for example, that cold open, or even something like Breaking Bad, the cold open, you know, the first 2 to 3 minutes of that pilot is like an immediate, puts you in a scene and you're invested and you need to see what happens next, right? And then some pilot episodes, on the other hand, something like White Collar that I checked out, you know, a little bit ago now in this series, that's something where the cold open is all well. White Collar does have a cold open too, but the ending is, it kind of gives you a twist of like, oh, I wonder what they're going to do with that. Like, where is this going to go? And then you want to watch the next episode. So for this one, I don't really think there's an ending because, you know, the very end of the episode does seem rather resolved, right? There's nothing that's, you know, really looming to where you need to click right away to the next episode to see what is going to happen, right? So I would say it's in the cold open if you want to say that, you know, for the hook of this pilot episode. But the other thing I would say about this pilot episode is the hook is actually really just the whole episode. Because of the way it immerses you in this world and is really building this different type of world that it wants you to experience, it's almost the whole episode as this hook, right? And, you know, I was hooked. I really enjoyed this pilot episode, right? Like I said, I felt immersed in it. And so I'm going to want to watch more episodes of it. So in that case, I think the hook was good as just, you know, the whole episode just establishing this world and these characters that you really like and you want to see more of. But in terms of a specific hook in like a scene or a sequence that really gets you, I just am not sure that it's here. The opening sequence to this pilot episode, like I've talked about, is Seth Bullock in Montana still and kind of, resolving this spat, if you will, where this guy, we don't get the full details of what he's done, but, he's obviously imprisoned, and then this mob of people come looking for him to basically, they want to torture and kill him. And, Bullock decides to do, the lawful thing and really kind of carry out justice the way it should be done and hangs him, instead of just giving him to the mob, right? And so that's kind of the whole sequence. And to me, I don't know, it wasn't that tense to me. And we don't really, it doesn't establish something right away to where I feel anything to that character dying. I never really felt like the mob of people were going to threaten them. So I don't know, maybe just a little more tension within that open. Maybe put, Seth Bullock at risk, or maybe have him get shot or something like that, just to kind of keep us on our toes and really, hook you within the first few minutes. But to me, it just kind of seemed like the scene was playing out, and I don't know, maybe some people, especially in 2004, for what it was, perhaps maybe that was more intriguing or more captivating, more hooky, if you will. But yeah, I don't know. I thought it was a good sequence, again, establishing the character of Seth Bullock, but yeah, I didn't really feel the tension there. I wasn't really worried for the characters. It was just kind of interesting to see that play out and kind of establishing what that world and what that time period was like in Montana. And like I said, the way that Seth Bullock approaches the world in being this lawful, moral, honest man that we see in that cold open. So yeah, could have been better, I would say, for the hook or the twist, which to me, unfortunately, is one of the most important aspects that I look for in these pilots, because at the end of the day, it's a pilot episode, right? Like, the point of these pilots is, first and foremost, to catch you, to hook you in, and then have you watch the whole rest of the show afterwards. Or at least, at the very least, watch the next episode. So that's what it is. Okay, so the originality or uniqueness of the pilot and what the show has to offer, I already talked a little bit about it, but I think it does stand out. Obviously, it's firmly in the Western genre. We're tackling characters I believe that have been in other Westerns, other Western films, or at least, as the series goes on, we get more of those characters. So firmly, we're in the Western genre here at this point, late 1800s, Deadwood, is the setting. Montana we get a little bit of too. So it's in the Western genre, but I do think it really stands out. Like I said, I do have to preface this because I am not the biggest Western fan. I've seen a few Westerns over my, time, mainly films, obviously. But yeah, so I'm not a big fan, so maybe I'm not the expert in this field, but I do feel like it is unique because the other Westerns that I've watched, certainly don't have this many fucks and all the swearing, that it has, but it kind of, this feels a little more gritty to me, a little more grounded and a little bit more realistic to how this, period was and how the world worked, especially in a place like Deadwood that was, chaos at this point in time. And I feel like the Westerns kind of more dramatized, the gun shootouts and this stuff. Maybe that's just the Westerns that I've seen. But that's, they kind of dramatize that and play that up. And in this, series, at least this pilot episode, I felt like it's a little more grounded here. It's, it's a little more, it feels a little more lived in. And we're really, focused on kind of the ugly part of this world. And like I said, the chaos, the lawlessness with Deadwood, what that setting and these characters really bring. So to me, I thought it really stood out. And then, obviously the quality here really makes it stand out. It's a great, example of what HBO has done for decades now, starting with The Sopranos, and, really great stuff. And it really interesting to me is that Rome the HBO series was out at the same time or within a couple years of Deadwood, and both shows were on at the same time, which is absolutely wild to me, in terms of the quality and just like the stuff that was on TV at that time was really impressive. So to me, yeah, especially for the time, but even now, I think it is really unique and it stands out within that Western genre for sure. Now, do you see films with a little bit more of like deeper characters and kind of studying more of kind of, why people acted like this and why it was such chaos and this kind of thing? Something like Unforgiven comes to mind with Clint Eastwood, Morgan Freeman, Gene Hackman. I really quite enjoy that film. I believe it won Best Picture in the 1990s. And that's a film that kind of, explores that kind of other side to the Western and to these, people that are involved. And so the pilot, I don't think does that quite yet with these characters. But like I said, I'm sure that the show goes there and I'm sure that we get a little bit more of that exploration. So to me, yeah, I think it stands out. And as the show goes on, I think it's going to be even better in that aspect as well. So can't say enough about how much it stands out within the Western genre, and at least to me, I mean, this is unlike a lot of other shows that I've even watched. Like, this is, I would maybe go to something like a Game of Thrones. Like, it seems very dense. There's a kind of a big ensemble, a lot of characters here. Obviously, the setting is a little bit more remote compared to Game of Thrones, but the quality and just the level of really like filmmaking and writing, directing, everything seems kind of on that similar level with like an HBO show. So yeah, can't say enough good things about it. Really enjoyed that. So in terms of my rating then, out of 10 for this pilot episode, I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. Which is pretty high. I think that makes it either the third or fourth best pilot that I've watched in the series so far out of eight shows, I believe. So yeah, just overall for the episode in general, like I said, there's not a real central plot that's really driving throughout this entire episode. That would be the only thing that and along with the hook that's kind of missing here a little bit. But outside of those two, I just really enjoyed this and really, like I said, felt immersed in this episode, in this world, and loved a lot of these characters that we got introduced to, especially Al Swearingen. Absolutely love that character after just an hour, with him. So I can't wait to explore more of that. But yeah, I gotta give it an 8 out of 10. I think I would still take Justified's pilot over this one. But again, it's kind of even hard to compare Justified to this just with the quality difference, right? With the amount of budget and everything and the world building that comes into play here. But yeah, we'll say that for now. Breaking Bad still at the top, then Justified, and then maybe Deadwood here at number 3. Really did enjoy this pilot episode. So, and like I said off the top, I am planning to watch the whole series now, and later on the movie probably. So definitely be checking out more episodes. And if I get a chance, probably I'll share my thoughts on the series or maybe a few seasons of it at some point on the channel when I get to the end of it. But anyways, that'll just about do it then for this pilot review. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on Deadwood and this pilot, like I said off the top. If you're a fan of the show, you've watched it all the way through, maybe spare the spoilers, like I said, because I will be watching it, but love to hear your guys' thoughts regardless. But anyways, so we got a few shows kind of coming up. I really am going to, really try to do Walking Dead pilot here in a couple of weeks when Daryl Dixon comes back, and hopefully a couple others before then. We'll have to see. But anyways, that'll just about do it for this one. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you then in my next Throwback pilot review.